Welcome back, everyone, to an American Discussion podcast. I am one of your hosts, Michael, and with me, as always, is Drew. How are you doing, Drew?
I'm doing good, buddy. I have been completely inundated with politics the last week, as I'm sure a lot of the country has been. So,
did something happen?
Yeah, there was a Senate race that ended up being a split, dude. It's weird. So they're going to let 3 senators from one state this year for the first time ever.
Oh, wow, really?
Dude, it's insane. It changes the whole demographic of Congress, and now there can be now the vice president is irrelevant in the Senate because there's no more ties.
Did the Democratic and Republican candidates tie 50-50, so they just gave it to the two
Green
independents?
It was a Green Party representative.
Green Party and
Jill Stein.
Jill Stein and RFK for...
Yeah. For anybody who doesn't know and who has a normal life that doesn't follow this stuff all the time, that was a lie. We actually had the 2024 presidential election. Results are technically still out, but we know what the outcome is. So,
Yep.
For those that don't know, former and I guess President-elect Donald Trump won. As of right now, the count is 295 electoral votes and 73.3 roughly million votes for Trump to Harris's 226 electoral college votes and roughly 69 million votes. So the popular vote spread is 50.7 Trump, 47.7 Harris as of right now. So, Michael and I obviously had different, we voted opposingly. We had our little side.
Before we get into all of that, how have you been in the last week?
Stressed. Inundated in politics.
Yep. You and me both. Do anything fun over the weekend?
Dude, I bagged up 20 bags of leaves, and it looks like I don't even own a rake in my backyard right now, so. What about you?
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, they have those little backpack leaf mulchers. You can just suck them all up like a vacuum cleaner, and it puts it right in a bag for you. Although from the ones that I've seen, the bags that go on the backpack are pretty small, so you're gonna have to empty it
a lot,
pretty frequently. But you also have a riding mower, right?
Yeah. So
they do make a little deck attachment for that, specifically for cleaning up your leaves. But those are a little pricey. So
you see how much they were? I didn't even look into that.
The riding mower ones?
Yeah.
No, but I imagine anything made by John Deere or made to fit a riding mower is going to be over $1,000 for an attachment.
No. The Cub Cadet 1 bag for $42, which would be mine, is $450.
Is that just for a bag?
It's the vacuum attachment that has the hose that goes down to your deck and everything like that. So.
Okay.
Oh, I can get the double bagger for another $20. No, $10. So for an extra $10, I can get a whole nother.
Might as well do that.
I'm saying.
I mean, $450 still isn't anything to
scoff at.
Scoff at, yeah.
And
but could definitely be a.
I don't want to have to run my mower every time I want to pick up leaves either. But this does look like that attachment that everybody uses for mulching their grass into as well, so that might be beneficial.
Yeah, I did something similar, but instead of raking them all up, I chopped them into tiny bits and put them on my lawn. And I know you said in one of our offline conversations that you did that with bad results. But I read some articles that said it's good for your lawn, so we'll see.
The wife and I.
If I also have bad results, we as a podcast will officially endorse raking your leaves instead of mulching them.
I think I would push for a leaf blower personally, but yeah. The wife.
Well, we support Big Rake here.
See, I like to support big blowers, personally.
Oh, you're taking the big blower money, huh?
Yep. All that juicy big blower money. No, but the wife and I talked about it at dinner, and I think the problem I could have had last year is that I waited for all the leaves to fall and then I mulched them all. So it could have just been a sheer volume issue. This year, what I might try to do is this weekend I'll hit it with the mower and mulch it on the lawn, and then after we get back from deer camp, I'll get the rest of them off the grass and then bag those. If
I did it. I did mine on a very dry day when the leaves were dry, and it did a great job. And now that it's rained a little bit, I can see the little bits, but they're all down under the grass canopy, which is where you want them. So I think I might have decent results. The reason I did it is because I have a giant sandy patch in my backyard, but it is covered by the world's biggest, bushiest maple tree. So the lack of sunlight might have more to do with it than lack of nutrients.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
That's where all of my dead spots too are, underneath the trees, where they're already getting sparse light, and then the leaves just killed it.
Yeah, I don't mind the fact that there's no ground cover there, but it's very sandy. It drives me nuts because every time you go out in the backyard, you walk inside and there's just sand and little bits of dirt everywhere.
Yeah.
And I take my shoes off and rub them on the mat or wipe them on the mat, but my kids and my dog do not.
Nope, they don't give a shit.
But yeah, speaking of deer camp, I did get out and sight in my new rifle, and I gotta say, you were right. That thing kicks like a beast.
I told
you. It's like shooting a 12 gauge shotgun or like a high powder charge muzzle loader. But I ran through.
You know what we call
like
that
a box and a half of ammo, and I wasn't actually that sore. I think I was doing a pretty good job of keeping the gun where I needed it to be. But I was definitely to the point where I didn't want to shoot anymore because my form was just getting worse.
Mm-hmm. And after you're doing that many rounds, you're gonna anticipate the shot almost no matter what.
Right.
It's so fresh. That impact is so fresh in your body that it's just even subconsciously you wince a little bit, you know what I mean? That real quick tensing. So now
So I'd like to get out there one more time, just make sure I've got a consistent grouping.
Yeah, make sure you use the same ammo. Whatever you plan to shoot a deer with, make sure you shoot that. So I hope you spent that last range time kind of feeling what your gun likes better, and then secondarily what you liked better.
Yes, and ideally you and I can get out and shoot together, but maybe we'll do that after deer camp. I don't know. We'll see what our schedules are like.
Yeah, we'll have to check it out. We might be able to do it Thursday morning if you want. Are you coming over Wednesday
Yeah, we
night?
could. I'll probably come over Thursday.
Okay.
So,
because I have I have parent-teacher conference at 11:30 Thursday, so we can go before that if you wanted.
Well, I don't know if you know, but schools are not a great place to sight in a rifle.
You say pools?
Schools. It's kind of a big issue these days.
Okay, I was so confused. That's what I'm saying. We can go before that. Really get the distances down and hold your zero right.
Yeah. I was doing most of my shooting at 50 yards, which I think is
that's about what you want to be.
A pretty good range. I'm not sure how much it'll vary from 50 to 100 or 100 to 50, but
outside of 100 you'll start seeing some significant changes, but you should be fine up to 100. at that point, you're talking about a difference of at most half an inch on target. But
Yeah, and I was
less.
within a 2 inch grouping, even with, kind of that form drop off or bad form to begin with.
Yeah, and I'll show you some other tricks too when we go out to try to help a little bit with that. The fundamentals of shooting is very technical, but once you get it, everything else becomes a million times easier.
Yeah, and I think that's what I need because, I kind of feel like I'm shooting in a video game where you just got to wait for the reticle to stop swaying until
that's not
until it's right on the right on that exact point. Just wait for that sway to stop, and then that's when I take my shot. So I think I might be doing something wrong.
Yeah, that's to be expected. Unless you have somebody actually teach you what you got to do, it's really hard to just figure it out. But luckily, I've shot tens, if not hundreds of thousands of rounds down a rifle, so I've got a little bit of experience.
Yep, and that's definitely something I could use. So,
and I'll bring the AR, so we can blow off a box of AR and have some fun. And did you shoot an AR?
Yeah, that'd be
AR style in the Navy at all, or not really?
I mean, an M4, if that counts.
Yeah,
but
it is. It's the same platform. Did you shoot a lot, or just like for qualification, or?
Just a little bit. I didn't actually, go out to the range with it or anything on a regular basis. I think I shot it twice total, but probably 4 magazines worth.
Oh yeah, so not a whole lot.
No.
Well, you'll get to see the difference between a military and a civilian level AR. And military grade will be that much funnier after that.
Yep. But that is part of my story with standing on top of a submarine on 4th of July.
Oh yeah.
Shooting an M4 at full auto.
It's a great feeling, dude.
Just about the most American thing you can ever do.
Mm-hmm. I'm here for it. So, are we ready?
Yeah, let's dive into it.
So, obviously Trump won. I think there's quite a few reasons. I think there's things that Trump did really well, and I think there's stuff that the Democratic Party did very poorly. I do want to give Kamala some credit here. I don't think she was dealt the best of hands. I said it before the election. I wasn't voting against Kamala. I was voting against the Democratic Party. I wasn't even particularly voting for Trump. I think they handed her a shit sandwich and said, you need to make this a Thanksgiving dinner. And she couldn't. I don't think she made it much better, the situation she had. And we can get into some of that if you like. I kind of just want to get your feel.
Yeah. I have some strong feelings on why I think the Harris campaign and the Democrats as a whole kind of tanked. But I think I did make some pretty good calls before the election. I also made some pretty bad ones, and we'll get into that. But I think my rationale was correct. I just had a huge misread on the way, especially young voters, would swing in this election, and I think a lot of the.
Proud of making.
I think a lot of the, liberal base, kind of did as well, because I think when it comes down to it, Harris lost the young vote, and she lost ground in all of the traditionally liberal voting blocks, just across the board.
The crazy thing is how evenly she lost across the board. It wasn't like she overperformed in California, in New York, but then she underperformed in Michigan, or it was across the board. She did worse everywhere than the 2020 Democrats did.
Yeah, just like a 1 to 2 point shift or more in basically every demographic.
And so I think the problem with that is the way that the Democrats look at politics has been very good for the last 40, 50 years. As far as demographically breaking down their constituency and really the country to try to build their coalition. And I think that's also what's really incentivized identity politics, is that they've realized that for a lot of the history, the country you were able to do that as a country, mainly because people lived in similar communities. So they, especially back in the day during times when immigration really built the country into what it was, where people from Germany settled in this area, people from Italy settled in that area, people from, they would settle in their own little communities, right? I think it was very effective to use identity politics then. I don't think it is anymore. I think the internet has very much, in a way, homogenized us as far as the way we think, not necessarily like the individual, but the way we take in information has changed so drastically, so quickly. And I think the Democratic Party banking on identity politics has really been their downfall as far as this election went.
Yeah, and I think I pushed back on identity politics a little bit, kind of denying that was the sole, kind of a issue or campaign strategy. But looking back on it, the Harris campaign focused on a lot of things, but that was the thing that I think did push it over the edge.
So I think I think the heart of the Harris campaign is what it almost had to be, and it was that she wasn't Trump and she wasn't Biden.
Yeah, so when you boil it down, the things that voters saw, and this is with ads, this is with statements, this is with right-leaning media amplifying specific things, this is with left-wing media amplifying specific things. The things that got blasted around the United States were Trump is bad and evil, and the people that oppose us are against these particular groups, right? Mm-hmm. And when I think about it from a rational standpoint, I think that's what you're saying with identity politics, right?
Yeah, they're assuming that people think the same because of their identity.
Yes, and that's a big swing and a miss for the Democratic Party this time, is just assuming that Latinos would vote as a block, black mm-hmm. people would vote as a block, women would vote as a block. That did not happen. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you want to dive into this right away, but I think that focusing on the abortion issue could have been a good strategy, but I think that the Harris campaign and the DNC as a whole had spent far too long just trying to deride Trump and call him a fascist and try and lump in all of his supporters as fascists. Mm-hmm. And when we think back to that what do they call it, the Dark Brandon speech, yes, that Joe Biden made.
Yep. That was one of that harshly turned me off against that party.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the turning point for when the Democrats started saying, "Hey, we've got to start focusing on calling this guy a fascist, calling it what it is." From their perspective, you can call it strongman politics, whatever you call it. They were trying to call it out, and they decided to call it out as fascism. And they said, it is the MAGA Republicans that are the problem. It's not the rational conservatives. But I don't know if you realize, but a lot of the Republicans and conservatives are very, I would say, passionate about voting for Trump and the change that
yes.
the change that Trump can bring. So a lot of people just outright support Trump. So when you say, it's the Trump or the MAGA Republicans that are the problem, these are the fascists, you're turning people off, and you are villainizing
people you need to vote for you.
Yeah, essentially, what maybe like a quarter of Americans, something like that. Even it might even be more.
I would say it's not even that, honestly, but it's a big enough chunk, because if you think about it, roughly 33% of the country is Republican, 33% is Democrat, and 33% is independent, roughly. So even if we say half of the Republicans are the diehard Trumpers, the MAGA Republicans, as they say, you're still talking about 15% of the population. But that's a big
I agree. And I'm not even saying that it's just the diehard, MAGA Republicans that are the ones that are offended by this. It's the people that voted for Trump. It's the people that associate with, Donald Trump's politics, that, maybe they don't think he's a great guy, but they think he's got good ideas, and he's going against the machine in Washington D.C., right? So like all of those people you just offended and alienated. And then when you say, yeah, absolutely. And then when they focused on this abortion issue, they could have done that in a different way. They could have made it not the entire yeah, so their 2 points were basically abortion and Donald Trump sucks, right? And
we
the way they went about
but nothing really. They never explained a
yeah, and
on that.
And I think
we're not going to do homework.
I think
most people.
I think the economy is also a big part of it, but I don't even think that the economy numbers as a whole matter at all. It's just that people are struggling and people are pissed, right? So then when you further piss them off, you're going to lose everyone. 100%. Because, people like to think back, oh, well, this many years ago I was better off. Well, it doesn't even really matter that much what the state is, because that was pre-COVID, pre all of this inflation. It doesn't even matter what the economic policies were, essentially, because you have this big, leap in inflation, leap in housing prices. The Democrats could have had the best fucking economic policy of all time, but when you say, we're going to do more of the same, we're going to, keep focusing on the things we've been focusing on.
On multiple different occasions, not only was the economy bad and perceived to be bad by the populace, on multiple different occasions, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and their administration all came out and said, the economy is not bad, the American people just don't understand. The economy is actually good, you guys just don't understand how it works. Like, that's not a winning pitch. It's just...
Yeah, and like, honestly, to a point, like, as somebody that can rationally look at data, I kind of agree with them. The economy was on the upturn. It is, by some metrics, the strongest the economy has been in terms of both growth and total output. But that doesn't fucking matter if people can't afford groceries, right?
Yeah, when you've had
they can't afford housing,
inflation for like 18 months in a row. Okay, you got the inflation rate down to 3%, but you still have all of those months where it was 4, 5, 6%, and the prices are still baked up that high. Like, so don't tell people that just because you've lowered the inflation rate that the problem's solved now and you're great. Like, no, the prices still went up by that much for that long. So
yeah, and
a lot of that metric
I'm sorry.
A lot of the American people.
I apologize if this episode kind of just turns into me going off on a giant rant about all of these different things, but honestly, I have a lot of pent up frustration after this election. Not because Trump won, but because I've spent quite a bit of time trying to defend the Democratic Party, to prevent another Trump presidency, because I didn't think that's what was best for America. But now that it's over, I can freely fucking criticize them for all of the things that I think they've been fucking up.
Yep.
So
I think a lot of Democrats feel like you right now. So
yeah, and that's probably true.
I want to try and cut on a little bit.
You go ahead before I keep going.
Yeah. So I actually listened to 3 separate liberal podcasts today. The one of note that I really want to talk about, this is the one that surprised me the most, was the Pod Save America one. So I don't know if you're familiar with Pod Save America. I don't know if you listen to it or not.
Somewhat. I haven't listened to... I don't think I've listened to an entire full episode.
Okay. So they're not center-left, right? They are pretty stiffly, I'd say, in the middle of the left wing. And by that, I mean, like, in the... top quintile, maybe something like that.
Progressive left.
Yes. So they're pretty far left. I think most of the media bias charts and companies have them pretty far over there as well. But anyway, I was expecting, because I kind of want to hear from all sides, right? As an independent, I want to hear what everybody's thinking, not just one side or the other. That way I can kind of get a better view of the entire thing, because at the end of the day, my guy's going to lose 99.999% of the time anyway. So I need to see what my other options are in order to make what I think is an educated and ethical vote. Now, that being said, I was listening to them, and I expected it to all be how it's Trump's fault, he's the reason, or it's Americans are just too stupid to see what they did, or Joe Biden's to blame because he said these bad things about Kamala, or, insert the blame game here. And while they didn't criticize Kamala at all, which I do think she definitely had a role to play, which I'm sure I'll get to later, but they were actually pretty, at least honest with the diagnostic. I don't think they're honest with it completely, and I don't think they're being honest with the prescription for remedy. But they're also saying the Democratic Party has failed. The Democratic Party essentially needs to completely change its strategy, not only during elections, but during off seasons as well. And that their way of governance and their way of running the party is no longer effective. So they blamed a lot on the Democratic Party, which I tend to agree. They thought she did really well. For what I think... So, as an overarching theme, I think the Democratic side lost because of 2 main reasons. Everything else, I think, is subsidiary. But I think the 2 primary words that sum up why the Democratic Party lost is authenticity and accountability. I do not think that the American people believed, nor do I think that the Democratic candidate for sure, and party more broadly, I don't think the American people believed that they were authentic. And I think that showed in a lot of Kamala's flip-flopping. She did not stand on anything at all. She sat on the fence for almost every single issue. She was afraid to upset anyone in her coalition, and that has to do with the Democratic Party itself and the fact that they've been running on identity politics for so long that they created a coalition of identities and not ideals. Which, one thing about conservatives is they tend to have their ideals at least in order, but they don't know how to get anybody together on them, right? So with the Democrats embracing that, for lack of a better word, woke culture, and having that be such a part of their coalition, they couldn't say any one thing was bad because someone in their coalition was bound to agree with that thing, and they were going to lose a portion of that coalition because of that. Whereas Trump did really well because Trump can say 10 things, and you might dislike 7 of them, but you know that Trump is being Trump, right? At the end of the day, nobody thinks that Trump is putting on a show and a mask right now. Either they think he's great because of who he is, or they think he's evil because of who he is, but they all know who he is. You know what I mean? And Kamala Harris didn't have that. I think that was a big thing. Another thing was accountability, which you and I have talked about a lot. The Democratic Party really has none, or they have not leading up to this point. I really hope they change that and do get some accountability. And I think Trump's one of the Trumpisms that he's used a lot is they didn't fire anyone. And I think the American people heard that. And I think the American people are frustrated at that because it makes them an elitist organization that is not like the people. You know what I mean? If the people go into their job and they suck, they're going to get fired. The Democratic Party does not fire anyone. If anything, they promote them. Right? So I think those two big things, or like, for example, when they wouldn't concede anything. So if we go back through the annals of the campaign, starting with Russiagate, when Russiagate came out, you didn't see a single fucking CNN anchor come out and say, hey guys, I realize that I've been puffing this story for the last 3 years. Come to find out it was false, and that there was some unscrupulous funding methods used by some Democratic officials. And this was wrong, and we were wrong, and we apologize for being wrong. We try our best to be an objective news source, right? Blah, 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 whatever. None of them did that at all. They just went on like business as usual, nothing to see here type of shit. They did the same thing when it came out that the Hunter laptop story was essentially suppressed by the FBI. Nope, nothing to do with us. Next thing in the news, Donald Trump's Hitler, right? There was no accountability for any time they did anything wrong. And I think if they would have, that would have gone a long way with the American people.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. There were definitely at least big portions of those stories that didn't get, put out or followed up on. Whereas, the right-wing media was essentially trying to bang down the door and say, hey, what the fuck's going on?
No, and I think the Republican Party, to their credit, did a good job of highlighting those things and driving up an energy level within not only their base, but the American people at large, of getting them upset about that. And I think that was strategically a good call on their behalf.
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily much different from what happens on the other side of the fence, but it is different in the fact that it's these giant corporate media sources that people at the very least have the appearance of being complicit in left-wing politics. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. I don't necessarily think that there's some big conspiracy, but at the end of the day, optics is everything, 100%. Right? So
a problem that I think, the reason why I think it sank them so much is because Donald Trump was running against them. He's saying, I'm better than them because of my policy prescriptions, right? I don't know of many times that I've seen Trump come out and say something amazing about his character, as far as I'm a really humble guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not, I'm super compassionate. That's not Trump's message. Trump's message is, I will come in, I will break shit, and these are the policies I want to put in place. The Democratic side has been running on a platform of, we care about everybody. We are honest. We want the little guy to succeed, and we want you to have the best information you can have. And then you lied multiple times. I think another big one that really hurt them was saying that Joe Biden was tip-top shape, sharp as a tack. If you had a video of him doing something that made him look senile, that's just a cheap fake from the right, trying to show you that, trying to spin something into something it's not. Instead of actually taken care of that problem in the beginning, I think it would have gone a long way if they did. I
agree with that.
And you're lying to our faces, and we watch it on national television on the debate stage.
And we've talked about this on air before, and my only pushback to that could be, I think that was campaign strategy, right? And
sure, but then you can't be mad when you lose because the American people don't like being lied to.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I'm just saying as somebody arguing essentially the liberal side, the Democratic side, that was the only thing I had. That was the only ammo in my bag there. Mm-hmm. It was campaign strategy. They had to stand behind him.
They did
but
not have to.
Again, like you were saying, accountability, right? Mm-hmm. Like at the very least, if you were gonna do that, be honest with the American people and say, okay, we realized that, he wasn't, sharp as a tack. He wasn't in tip-top shape, and we asked him to step down because we don't think he's capable of leading America for another 4 years, right?
I think they could have said
something to that effect.
Helped them immensely. We lied to you, and we're sorry. If they would have just come out and said it, it would have saved them so much face. Just like, I don't know if you're familiar with Sean Ryan or not, right?
No.
Okay, so he's a former Navy SEAL, special operator of some sort. That he was also a CIA mercenary essentially for a while. Now he has a podcast, and he reported on that Kamala Harris photo shoot on the runway with the C-13s that were full of aid and didn't go. He said he pushed that on the podcast that he knew a guy at the Strip that said that plane never took off and the aid never got delivered. Come to find out a few days later, reporting came out that the plane had a mechanical issue, so they offloaded that plane, put it on a new plane. That plane had a mechanical issue. They offloaded it, put it on a new plane, and then that plane went to give hurricane relief, right? So Sean Ryan came out either that day or the next day and said, hey, look, I want everybody that heard my podcast to know that I put out misinformation on my podcast. I'm truly sorry about that. I want to be objective. I want to give up good information. And this is me holding myself accountable. So if I lose
fantastic.
people, I'm sorry. I hope you forgive me, right? If the Democratic Party would have done something like that after the Joe Biden situation, I'm not sure we'd be in the same position we are now.
I totally agree, and I think the media at large is complicit in that as well. No accountability. Like, journalistic integrity died with the newspaper and the buyout of all of these small media sources by these giant media conglomerates. Mm-hmm. There is no journalistic integrity. We don't have investigative journalists that are being paid for good quality work. We don't have.
I don't think that's the case.
People that are on retainer that are held to a journalistic standard and have the integrity to say, hey, we reported on this, it was wrong, and we're not just going to put it in a footnote. We're going to make sure that everybody knows.
Absolutely. I don't think that's writ large, though. I think that's the corporate media structure. You're starting to see a lot of it on independent news. You're starting to see a lot of it by columnists. Sorry, I got the hiccups for some reason. Columnists that submit to some of these some of these media companies. You'll see it, but more often than not, they have their own Substack going. They have their own little media website they do where they put their stuff out like a blog or something. They've either been forced out by the culture of these corporate media conglomerates, or they were just never invited because they didn't toe the party line. Well, now the party line just lost the election 295 to 226. You know what I mean? So I think there's definitely going to be a rejiggering of the entire setup, or there at least needs to be. And it's...
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
I think...
And I was gonna say I think this is as good a time as ever to read something I think a lot of people might not have heard, but Bernie Sanders actually put out a press release yesterday. We're doing this 2 days after the election. But I wanted to read 2 paragraphs out of this. The first one and essentially the last one. So he says, it should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. First it was the white working class, now it is the Latino and black workers as well. And while the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change. And they're right. And then he has a lot of good analysis in the middle, but the closing paragraph is: will the big money interests and the well-paid consultants who control the Democratic Party learn any real lessons from this disastrous campaign? Will they understand the pain and political alienation that tens of millions of Americans are experiencing? Do they have any ideas as to how we can take on the increasingly powerful oligarchy which has so much economic and political power? Probably not. In the coming weeks and months, those of us concerned about grassroots democracy and economic justice need to have some very serious political discussions. And, I came across that today, and I think he hit the nail on the head. And those, were all things that were floating around my mind and things that you and I had discussed yesterday and today. Mm-hmm. I think it's very clear that, this was a giant swing and a miss. Another thing that I read was basically that, those of us that do hold those, socially liberal and progressive values need to understand that those things are a luxury. Mm-hmm. When it comes to politics. You can't run a campaign based on, villainizing the other side and then also saying, but hey, look, we're gonna make this beautiful utopia for everyone that isn't gonna benefit the majority of, the American people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I also think it's kind of hard to, like we talked about, it's hard to call people fascists and bigots and misogynists and Nazis and bitter clingers or deplorables or whatever you want to call them, and then ask them to vote for you. It's just not going to work. At the end of the day, politics is essentially a popularity contest. Nobody gets popular outside of middle school by picking on other people. It just doesn't happen.
If you offend people to their core by, even if you're not, even if you don't think that you're talking to them, but if you imply that they are racists and misogynists, you're losing their vote. They're not going to trust you. They don't want anything to do with what you have to say. You can present them the world's greatest economic plan, but they think you're, the enemy, and they don't 100%. Give a fuck about you, right?
So I have maybe this isn't a good example, but I think it is. So at my local corner store, one of the employees is a trans person, right? So one day, after I went in there multiple times, and I misgendered them because I wasn't sure if it was just somebody dressing, edgy, or if that was the thing. After a few times, I asked their gender or what their pronouns were. They told me, and I've used them ever since. Now, if what had happened is the first time I misgendered them, they jumped down my throat, called me a fucking bigot, you can bet your last fucking penny that I would have misgendered them every single time after that. Every single time. Because if it's an attack, then I'm a terrible person because of something that I did, opposed to...
That's unclear.
Yeah, opposed to, hey, this is the thing, could you do it this way, right? And those are two different situations that get two different outcomes with the same two people, You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think when you're just mean and vitriolic and part of that was that they were running against Trump and they didn't have much else of a platform. So I kind of see it to emphasize, you know, it's the exclamation point after the fuck Trump is, and also you. I guess I get it, but it's just not a winning strategy, as we see.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that they doubled down on the anti-Trump rhetoric this time around, right?
I'd say
But-
they tripled it, quadrupled down. That was crazy. They should have, if they would have
But
ended that
when-
after the assassination attempt. Once he had that photo op with the American flag backdrop, his bloody face and his fist in the air, that should have been the end of the anti-Trump rhetoric, and then they should have switched to policy and tried to beat him that way. Because ever since that, you were not getting him on an anti-Trump. When he got shot in the fucking head and stood up and said, fight, 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 you're not convincing anyone that he's evil.
They did that. They did the same strategy 4 years ago, right? And it worked. People voted Trump out of office, right? They were apparently sick of what was going on then. But now they have spent 4 entire years just like talking about it, and you know, then you try and use the exact same thing as a campaign strategy, and what you've done is you've alienated and pissed off, I mean, more than half of the American people. So I don't think it's a big surprise that Kamala Harris lost the election. Now, I think we've pretty clearly covered the big downfalls of the Democratic Party here.
I definitely think there's more nuances to cover, especially as far as strategy goes. Not just beating down the Democratic side, but I definitely think there's still more substance. I don't think we're done at 47 minutes.
No. I absolutely. I think there is. I did just want to move on to some other interesting outcomes of the election, maybe some election demographics and stuff like that, and see if we can maybe parse out a little bit of why we think that is.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one thing I want to talk about is the youth vote.
Oh yeah, I have a pretty good idea why this one changed.
So
I've said it a couple times already on podcasts.
I think you and I both kind of hit the nail on the head, and if we had combined our two arguments, we would have had a clear idea of what was going to happen. So when we talk about polling and why I thought polling was going to be skewed right in this election, and why a lot of people were saying, oh no, they always underestimate Trump, so it's going to be, either dead on accurate or it's going to be an even bigger red victory, right? The reason that I personally assumed that it was going to be off in the other direction was because of the youth vote. So I made the mistake of assuming that Gen Z, who is now of voting age, was going to follow in the footsteps of the millennials, and the youngest millennials, as well as the older millennials. Most of our generation, I would say, if you had them just turn out and vote, I think it would be a clear victory for liberal politics in general. Now, Gen Z...
I think that's an age thing that I've talked about before, where a lot of people, as they're younger, tend to be more liberal, and then they start to become more conservative once they have their family. And I think that's what's happening. Millennials have aged out of that heavy liberal and have started to kind of split closer to the center as far as where the divide is.
I would agree with that, but we also were shaped in our formative years by a George W. Bush presidency with the Iraq War, and then Barack Obama with inspiring messages of hope and all of that, and
also more than Bush ever did.
Sorry, I got derailed there for a second. But anyway, I think that millennials as a young voting bloc would tend to be more liberal than your average young voting bloc, right? Mm-hmm. Thinking about it rationally and kind of through that historical lens. Now, I just assumed that Gen Z would be the same, and that probably has something to do with, the type of media that I consume and what I see online. And just assuming that a lot of these more conservative, channels and podcasts and videos and all of these things and news sources, thinking that those things would not appeal to that younger demographic. What it looks like happened is that these young voters that grew up in the undeniable age of the internet and social media and just, basically having access to that constant stream of information flow, I think that because they, kind of grew up in this era where the Democratic Party is just like constantly attacking conservative voters with hatred. A lot of them feel more aligned with the conservative side than with the Democratic side, right? And they, like you were saying with the identity politics, they fall into a group too. And they didn't have that preconceived notion of, for lack of a better word, liberal support that the millennials did. So they feel like they are ostracized because they are part of one of those groups that is being attacked constantly. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think happened. And like you were saying, and I think the Republicans made a much better pitch on social media, podcasts, all of that kind of stuff, places where those people were going to see it, and they were also seeing the Democratic pitch. They just didn't like it.
So, I think you're pretty close. I think what I would say is, so I expected a weird thing with the youth as well, but I kind of thought it would wash in the end. And I think I was a little wrong on that. So I thought that Kamala was going to pick up a lot of support from TikTok in particular. I think that a lot of her weakness in public speaking is at length. And seeing as TikTok is very short intervals, it was easier for her to reach that young audience in bite-sized chunks than it was for Trump. Because you can get a Trump gaffe in 7 seconds, but you can't get a cognitive thought from Trump in 7 seconds. You know what I mean?
Can I interject real quick with what I think was maybe the most effective, week before the election campaign by the conservatives?
Yeah.
I'm sure you saw this ad, but there was an ad where, and this was a little bit of, cobbled together footage or whatever, but it was very effective in my opinion. It was an interviewer asking Kamala Harris what she would do differently than the Biden administration, and she essentially just
said nothing,
kind of stutters and says, well, I mean, I was a part of all of those decisions, and then it ends.
Oh yeah, And that was from the, well, if you're a parent, we all make mistakes. Yeah, no.
And that could have gone out on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, the YouTube Shorts, all of that, and been effective.
So, I agree. I think they did good strategy. One thing that I think changed the landscape, and I think it's to Donald Trump's credit, and that I think you underestimated. I know so because you told me as much, and because the results ended up going the way they did, is podcasts. So, podcasts are the biggest media source, I think, in the world right now. And I'm including podcasts that are on YouTube, especially for young people. So I'm looking at Joe Rogan, and so his number one podcast was Elon Musk at 69 million views. That's a 3-hour podcast, one singular podcast. In the viewership of CNN, the best total day audience in 2 years as of October 1st, 2024, was 117 million multi-platform unique viewers. So across all of their platforms, all of their shows, everything, their articles online, everything was less than double what Joe Rogan got on one 3-hour podcast. Now factor in all the other podcasts that are going. If we want to look at the most popular podcasts, I'm going to go through a list according to Chartable.com. I also saw a similar list in other locations. So number one is obviously Joe Rogan Experience. Next is the New York Times The Daily. So I'm sure they get some good viewership. Just kind of keep a count in your head on which one goes which direction politically, right? So you got Joe Rogan Podcast Experience. I would say that tips right. New York Times The Daily tips left. The Charlie Kirk Show leans right hard. The next one is Pod Save America. That leans left hard. Then it's the Ben Shapiro Show, the Morgan Kelly Show, Dateline NBC. I would consider that not necessarily a good political one. But up first from NPR, that's a little left. Crime Junkie, not a political one. Then the Tucker Carlson Show, the Bulwark Podcast. So a lot, the Dan Bongino Show. I mean, a lot of these top podcasts are shifting right because the left hasn't been investing in podcasts almost at all. They have been relying on the corporate media to do their dirty work, which they have, but people just don't watch the corporate media anymore. They now have a lower trust rating than Congress for the first time in U.S. history. It's crazy to put that many eggs in that basket.
As you're talking about this, I think I have had a fundamental misunderstanding of podcast viewership. Mm-hmm. Because in my mind, as somebody who has been listening to podcasts since they became a thing, mm-hmm. I'm talking about, being a high schooler, downloading podcasts on my iPod when that was the only mm-hmm. platform that they were available.
Literally why they were called
exactly.
podcasts.
So this was almost exclusively an entertainment thing, and what I would consider like a left-wing thing. So it was like comedy and left-leaning commentary sort of stuff. NPR was one of the first on the platform as well. So I just kind of assumed that it still kind of maintained that same demographic.
And it has not.
And I didn't really look into it.
I tried to tell
honestly,
you about it
I knew
before the election.
I knew that Joe Rogan was one of the biggest podcasts, but that also kind of started as something that a lot of left-leaning people mm-hmm. Were into, and then UFC people, and then Joe Rogan started to shift more and more right.
I'm going to push back on that. I don't think Joe did. I think the political environment shifted left, and he stayed stationary and became right because of that.
I don't think so. Based on the statements that he's made in the last 10 years, if you look at them, he has changed his stances on a lot of things.
I'm gonna pause you right there, only because I've listened to so much of it that I've literally watched so much of that time. Right, so I've been listening to Joe Rogan since before we worked at CarStar together, and that was 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Yeah,
and I've been listening to him that whole time, and there's a lot of things that he is very left on. For example, gay marriage, drug legalization. If you get into social policies, he was a big proponent of the standardized basic income until COVID, and we saw how that negatively impacted work ethic and productivity. But there is a lot of things that he has been left on, and he still is left on. But the environment around him has shifted to he's anti-war, which used to be a Democrat thing, and now it no longer is. The whole thing has shifted to the left so much that he has now become right of center.
Now, no, when I hear you talk about some of those more progressive things, he has reversed his stances on those, right?
Tell me which ones.
And I will give you that.
The only one he's shifted on that I said was the basic income.
Universal basic income. He also changed his stance on things like vaccines.
I never said that.
And especially a lot of the the more fringe and conspiracy theory stuff is a lot of what he's been pushing in the last or I guess not pushing, but giving a platform to in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yes,
and I want to say what I want to say is that in my brain, he was losing viewership from basically everyone, and the only people that stayed were kind of people on the fringe that were into those kind of conspiracy theories and that kind of stuff, and that's not true.
No, it's not. With numbers like he puts up, it's just not true.
That's really my point here, is that I was wrong, and I underestimated that. And when I see people like Tucker Carlson and those types of people on the podcast front page, Ben Shapiro,
mm-hmm.
I just assume that this is where the Fox News radio and talk shows have moved to, and it's these these older people that are consuming that in an internet fashion now. But I also don't think that's true. I think that people have now aged into consuming their media in a different fashion, or I guess not aged into, but aged out of consuming television media, and now they are on internet media, and that has a much more wide-reaching net.
I think you're right. I think the reason for that is, one, we circle back to accountability of mass media. There just isn't any, and people are sick of it. And the reason that podcasts are so much more effective than mass media is because it's a longer format, right? So in these podcasts, we've been talking for an hour now. We've been able to flesh out way more of an idea than they can in mass media, where they have a 7-minute segment, right? So you're able to see the authentic person and not just the over glamorized, picture perfect broadcaster saying the words that are written in a perfect script by writers on a teleprompter, in between Pfizer commercials, right? It's actually sitting down and listening to somebody think out an entire idea and say it to people. Another thing is, it feels real. It feels like you're part of the conversation and not somebody that's watching paid broadcasters to say what
they want you to believe. I think that's been huge for people. I think today's age, the number one currency is authenticity. Because we have so many choices, why would you want to go listen to a fake source? And I don't mean it like Trump says fake news, but I mean someone who's portraying a character instead of someone who's actually being themselves, telling you how they actually feel, and being able to judge items based on how that person that you've already listened to their authentic self for 500 hours, you already know their bias, and they're saying this. It's better than any endorsement you can get on a mass media scale. For all of those reasons I just said. I think podcasting is the new way forward, and I don't think we ever see another election where one of the presidential candidates only does one podcast. I don't think that will ever happen again, and I want to give credit to Donald Trump because he didn't do that. He saw where the eyeballs were, went there, and put in the work. He did so many podcasts. He did Patrick Bet-David, he did Theo Von, which the Theo Von one was great because Theo Von was a good way to make Trump look personable. He was sitting there with a dude who literally said during the podcast, I used to do cocaine. Like, you can't even do cocaine anymore. It was something he said. But he did Joe Rogan. He did all of these other podcasts. He called into the Ben Shapiro show. He just did the work. And she didn't, because she didn't see it as that big of a threat, I think, similarly to you. And she paid for it. That's where the youth vote came from, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a fair look on that. And you know, another thing that I was wrong about, I think, was that I personally assumed, as you know, a millennial who's getting older, getting into, you know, what I would consider to be the core voting bloc, is I just assumed that the type of people that were consuming traditional, what you would say, liberal biased media, you know, these big media conglomerates, I thought that was the same type of person that 15, 20 years ago was consuming nothing but Fox News, right? So that's your older, you know, your older liberal voters, right? You know, you're 50 plus, you know, people like my parents, you know, sitting there tuning into MSNBC and, you know, CNN, ABC. But I don't think that's true. I think a lot of people are getting their news sources from there, which there are way better ways to, you know, get your information, and then instead of just taking it as a fact or taking the whatever slant that they're giving you, do some research beyond that just superficial story that you're getting, because every time you're getting a story, and it doesn't matter what source it is, the headline is trying to convince you first, right? Mm-hmm. The opening sentence, the lead, that is trying to convince you of something. And then the body is written in a way that is trying to convince you of something. And sometimes what they're trying to convince you of is facts, and it's trying to be written in a neutral way. But the fact of the matter is, those headlines and those leads are always going to be written in, you know, a way that's trying to convince you of something. So you need to do some follow up on that. So what I do want to say
is why the podcasts have gotten so popular. But continue.
What I do want to say is that it doesn't matter, even if the majority of liberal voters don't follow CNN and ABC and MSNBC and, you know, all of these big, what would traditionally be called liberal media sources. It doesn't matter, right? Because the conservative media did such a good job of painting that as what the, you know, the narrative that the left was trying to push on the people was, right? And I think they are complicit. I think the way that they were presenting stories just gave them easy ammunition. And I was rubbed the wrong way by a lot of the, headlines I was seeing from, and we talked about it, like those editorial sources. You had NBC, ABC, all of these different, news sources just plastering headlines from their editorial news or editorial politics section, just like lambasting Donald Trump and MAGA supporters and, all of these different things just constantly.
The line.
So, it was plenty easy to, manipulate a little bit of data and say, hey, these news sources are painting Donald Trump negatively in 95% of their stories, and conservative media is only painting Harris negatively in this many of their stories or whatever.
I think you're putting a lot of the onus on conservatives in that analysis.
I'm not. I'm saying they were doing it to an insane degree.
Conservatives' arms. All the conservatives had to do was open their arms, and everyone was sick of being yelled at, and so they shifted.
I totally agree, and I said that earlier. I'm just saying, like it was such an easy target to paint. They did it to themselves. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. I also think that they've been. So I think the left was already privy to social media being such a big factor. I think that's actually why you saw a lot of the cancel culture going after conservative media pundits. I think it started with Donald Trump and Alex Jones, and they realized it worked, so then they started going after everyone. Where I think they fucked up is when they tried to get Babylon Bee canceled, and that was one of the main reasons Elon Musk decided to buy Twitter. And I think Elon buying Twitter is a huge component of why this election went the way it did. I know you don't like Elon, but I think a large portion of the American populace does. But I think they've been trying to cancel these right-wing people for so long that conservatives had to build their own space to exist in. And it was a more friendly space to most people because instead of bastardizing half of the viewers, they just accepted everybody. So, like, there was no... It wasn't a hard decision for people to make. And I've fallen into this as well. I mean, I listen to Tucker's. I listen to the Ben Shapiro show. I definitely listen to Joe Rogan. I've listened to the Jordan Peterson show. I've listened to a lot of these things. I still can't get behind Alex Jones. He's just too insane for me. But... and it's because listening to left-leaning media, I'm sick of being called all these horrible things that I know I'm not. It's just exhausting, and if I'm going to be choosing how to spend my free time, it's not going to be getting yelled at by some Hollywood elitist. It's just not going to happen. That's another thing that I think the Democratic Party has done horrifically in the last decade, is that they used to be the side that was against corporations. They were against the elitist structure. They were for the working class, just like Bernie said, and they've inverted that, where if you're not a college-educated liberal who self-flagellates if you ever said anything bad about one of these protected communities, if you're not one of those people, then you're scum. And people were sick of hearing it. And I think the country spoke out on Tuesday, and we're seeing that now. I think that there's going to be a change. I think that mainstream media saw the wolf from a distance, which is why they started the whole cancel culture thing. But I think that literally just drove the entire country into their arms.
Yeah, I totally agree with basically everything you said there. I hate the cancel culture. I hate that, people have been going after people because of, the things that they were saying and trying to get them, pulled from various sources and all of that. Like, it's fine if an advertiser wants to pull out because of something offensive somebody said, 100%. But, like, when it's a coordinated campaign to try and get something taken down, that's fucking terrible, especially if it's on allegations. Like during the whole Me Too movement, tons of people were canceled because of allegations of sexual misconduct or whatever, and a lot of them turned out not to be true. I won't say
it was horrible for the cause that it's tried to start. I think it cast more doubt than there ever was before, and I think that it became so crazy so quickly that it just kind of got absorbed into ether. You know what I mean? I don't think that... I think they went too far, and there was too many bad actors within it that people see it as ridiculous.
Don't get me wrong. I totally, support, getting justice for people that were victims of,
100%.
Sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, rape.
100%.
I do not think that, we shouldn't take those people seriously. However, when you have people that are, highly publicized and then found out to be, like you said, just, misrepresenting the story, just trying to take people down, or, people spreading stories that turned out to be false just to,
and somebody still
get
lost
some
their
negative press on
livelihood
somebody. It turned out to be negative for the movement as a whole. Mm-hmm. So instead of trying to get justice through the criminal justice system and make sure these people were actually brought to justice and giving them due process and making sure that these people were actually found guilty, we were doing internet crusades to bring people down just because of, an accusation. And sometimes those weren't even real accusations. It was just people making up stories on the internet, and, there were no actual legal claims being brought. So, again, I don't want this to be misrepresented as me, not believing people that have these, accusations. I don't want people to think that I don't support the victims of, this type of crime. I definitely do, and I definitely think there needs to be justice, and I'm glad that we are taking it more seriously as a country. But I do think, it did more harm than good on a overall total American politics level, because more people were turned off by it than turned to action by
100%. It. And I think this is also part of that woke culture. I think a big part of the problem they had was the believe all women phrase. Like, okay, but we've all met women, and women are just human beings, just like men. Some men lie. Some women lie. So just like we can't believe all men, we can't believe all women.
We have to take every single case by case, assess it by its merits,
and then make a decision.
but stripping people of their
Livelihood immediately because somebody has an allegation goes against the entire justice
concept that we have of innocent until guilty. And it was, I think, one of the beginnings of the real
attack of people that don't align with your political views.
Right.
Yeah, and I think this whole thing goes back to, right, like there are some perceived injustices in the criminal justice system. Like, judges are more likely to, give differing sentences to men versus women, and they're more likely to believe, a man over a woman on, certain things, and that's where the focus should be, not on, socially going after people to ruin their livelihoods based on an accusation. We need to make sure that the criminal justice system can fairly deal with these things and, make sure we're actually getting these people justice.
100%.
And that would give get a better outcome for everyone in
I wish we would
this
all just
situation.
Take a minute, wait for the evidence, and then have an opinion. I feel this way on everything. There's very few
I totally agree
on Earth that I think the first iteration of you seeing it, that's the whole honest truth right up front. I feel that way with police videos, and I'm called a racist immediately. Like, okay, somebody was shot by police, regardless of the race of the person that was shot. Okay, well, let's see the body cam footage. Oh, well, you're just a blue line fanatic that's a bigot, and you're okay with police violence. Like, no, I just want to see if that was actually a bad cop that made a bad call, or if that was a good cop that was defending himself. I want to be able to see what happened before I make an assessment. I don't think that makes you a bad person. You know what I mean?
I agree with that, but I will push back a little bit on body cam footage. I think that the demand for body cam footage, the demand for body cam footage usually comes from the people that want to uncover a perceived injustice, not the people that are.
One thing I love about cameras is that they don't lie. If I
that's true.
Hear everything that's happening, I can then make my own decision and not have someone else tell me how I should feel about something.
They do give one perspective, a narrow focus, but a lot of times that is enough to make a decision. So now I do want to circle back. Oh man, it was just in my head, and now I can't remember what we were talking about.
How about we shift into...
And we're getting kind of close to time, so how about we shift to what we think will happen and what we hope... So what we hope will happen and what we hope won't happen with a Trump presidency. I'll go first
totally fair.
You can go first, whatever you want.
Yeah, I can go first. So what I hope will happen with a Donald Trump presidency. I almost said pregnancy, man.
Wild.
Is that Donald Trump becomes president and gets pregnant and then becomes the first president to have a baby in the White House as a man.
On the floor of the Lincoln bedroom.
Okay, so I hope that a lot of these fears that the Democratic Party was trying to push on people are unfounded, and that Donald Trump does not do a lot of these things that they're accusing him of wanting to do, specifically with regard to weaponizing the Department of Justice and going after his political opponents. And I think that is pretty unlikely. I think there will be investigations. I think it's unlikely that he does go after political opponents in a brazen way, right? Because he soundly won the election. He doesn't have anything to prove.
It's about building his legacy, I think. To him,
I do think he's gonna find some way to cancel, these, criminal cases against him, and then after that, after that, what does he have to lose? We can talk about that.
All right, then now we're already at an hour 23. Let's save that for later.
Yeah,
there's plenty.
I think Jack Smith is ramping down the cases because it's against DOJ policy to prosecute a sitting president. So they're shelving that case. But anyway, so weaponization of the DOJ. Mass deportation. I think they are going to do a campaign to do that. I really hope that if they do that, it does not violate normal Americans' privacy, which is one of my big concerns, and we talked about that on the podcast before. Violation of the
Fourth Amendment
privacy rights of all American citizens. I hope that they do not deport legal citizens on scale, and I hope that they don't revive their denaturalization campaign to, revoke the citizenship of people that have been, accused of petty crimes. Let's call it less than a felony, or less than a violent felony, even. For naturalized citizens that have been, convicted of any kind of crime. Those are my big ones right off the bat. There's plenty of other things. I know we're kind of short on time, and we'll get into that. There's going to be 4 years to talk about it.
4.5.
So, yeah. So, go ahead with what you want.
So, a couple of things I hope he doesn't do. I agree with the first of what you said. I hope he doesn't go after his political opponents. I don't think he will, for the reasons you mentioned, for the legacy reason I mentioned, and also because we have precedent for it. I mean, he didn't go after Hillary when he very easily could have. Whether or not she'd have been in prison or not, who knows, but he didn't go after her. I also, I've said offline to you, and I will say it on the podcast as well, I hope he doesn't do it, but if he does, I understand. And I really wouldn't be too terribly surprised. That door has been kicked open by the Democrats, or at least it's perceived to have by not only Trump, but a large portion of the country. So I think if you open the door and you use bad tactics on your opponent, you can't really cry victim when they do it back to you. But again, I hope he does not, for clarity. As far as deportation, I kind of hope he does. Actually, not even kind of. I do hope he does, but I also hope it doesn't violate regular Americans' Fourth Amendment rights. And I want to touch on the citizenship thing you said as well. I think American citizenship should not be able to be taken for anything less than treason. I think that is the only reason that you should be able to be stripped of your citizenship. Once you have it, right? I do not think that he should go against anyone that has been naturalized. However, I think he should empower ICE and Border Patrol to get a lot of the illegal immigrants out. I know you and I differ on our beliefs as far as immigration go to some extent. But I think that somewhere around 20 million immigrants in the last 10 or so years is insane. We're talking about 10% of the nation's population almost, of people that have not been vetted, of people that have not gone through any sort of assimilation process. And I think they need, and people that are using American resources and not paying American taxes. I think it's a net negative on America and not only our resources but our culture. So I do hope he deports a lot of people. A lot of that comes down to my beliefs on government spending, though. I do think he should give people, given our recruiting issues, I think he should give people that do not have any crimes other than the illegal crossing, he should give them an opportunity to serve in the military. And if you want to do 8 years in the military and earn your citizenship like so many Americans have that exact same way, I think we should allow that. That's not something I think Trump has ever said, though. As far as another thing I hope he doesn't do, I really hope he doesn't go back on his word and just be a war expander. I don't think he will. Like I said, he's literally been bragging about not starting new wars. And I think that he's in the legacy era of his. I think this campaign will be a legacy campaign where he tries to just make himself out to be God's gift to America. And I hope that works out in our favor. Another thing I really hope he does, and I'm sure you know what I'm about to say next, I don't think he will do it. Any guesses?
slim down the federal government
No,
by a large margin.
I hope he does that. But one thing I think would be amazing is getting rid of the income tax. I don't think he will.
Oh,
do it.
yeah.
He's definitely floated it. I think that that's something that will help counterbalance his tariff plan. Like we used to do, for those who don't know, for most of American history, our government generated income by tariffing other countries, and we did not have an income tax. We kind of touched on that in the Drew Hayes and Woodrow Wilson episode. But yeah, that's something I think would be good. And we will definitely get less tax revenue out of it. But I also think we should massively shrink the government to not need as much tax revenue. So I think it would force us into that situation, which I think would be a good thing. I also hope that he empowers RFK to make changes necessary with big agriculture and with big pharma and with a lot of these subsidies and those groups that lead to so many health problems in America, particularly the obesity epidemic. So I hope he does that. I hope he doesn't let JFK completely dismantle any vaccine programs. Well, I don't think they should be mandatory. I still think they're a vital science for this nation. And we still need to be able to protect ourselves from viruses in the future should we so choose. So the last thing I really hope he does is help unite people. I know it's kind of hard to imagine Trump as a uniter. I think there's evidence that he can be if you just look at the results of this election. He brought a lot of people together that were in elections before would never have voted for him, but did. I am one of them. I have never voted
and
for him
I
until
think
now.
I think that maybe not Trump, but J.D. Vance was saying a lot of things that I think were very reactionary to liberals, but I can definitely see him being a uniter. If he were to take over the presidency or have the next presidential bid, I think he could easily shift his rhetoric to, bring everybody under that umbrella.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I think Trump shouldn't do that he said he's going to.
Okay, well, while you're thinking about that, I do want to give a small rebuttal. When you said something about denaturalization of citizens, I totally agree. I'm 100% on board. I don't think any American citizen, once you have your citizenship, you are an American citizen. You have all of the rights under the Constitution. Unfortunately, there is some precedent that talks about denaturalization in prior legislation and Supreme Court cases. And there was a denaturalization program under Trump's first term, which is why I used the language that I did, saying that I hope that his denaturalization program, which he does intend to bring back, does not go so far as to strip people that are only accused or only convicted of petty crimes and misdemeanors, rather than things like espionage, treason, that kind of thing. In his first term, there was some people that were denaturalized due to fraud and that type of thing, which I think is absolutely abhorrent. But yeah,
I think fraud's abhorrent too.
Well, I think somebody being stripped of their citizenship
No, I know.
due to a crime is abhorrent.
No, I think they should serve prison time and then have the opportunity to be rehabilitated and reintroduced into society just like every other American.
Yep, exactly.
But I guess I didn't know that there was judicial precedent for this, but I guess if there is, there's not much I can say about it. As far as that goes, it'll just be one more thing that the government allows that I dislike. But yeah, I think that treason, espionage is another good one, but I think espionage can be manipulated into a charge, even when there might not be one. I think Snowden's a good example. That's another thing I hope he does. I really hope he does release the JFK files and the RFK files. I want answers. And I know a lot of other Americans do too. I don't think that the story of it's just Lee Harvey Oswald was a kook that decided to take a shot. If that was the case, we wouldn't still be waiting for the files to be released 50 years later. That tells me that there had to have been some type of governmental wrongdoing, and I want to see it. That's just my opinion. I also hope that he tells us about aliens if there are any, like he said he would. But that's just one of my more niche, nerdy things that I think would be funny to see. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay, well, I did remember the other thing that I wanted to quickly touch on, which was tariffs. And we've talked about it on the show, I think, multiple times before. But when we talk about the former state of tariffs back in the 17 and 1800s, that was based on a trade system where we were basically only importing luxury goods, and the United States could, for the most part, be self-sufficient and produce everything we needed here at home. Mm-hmm. Now, if that's the plan, I don't necessarily support total isolationist policy as far as trade and, economic factors. But if we can make everything we need here in the United States, and tariffs are just to protect domestic industries, I'm all for that. But they have to be strategic. When you just put blanket tariffs down, mm-hmm. We've already seen in the past 2 days companies saying, hey, prepare yourself for higher prices if these tariffs go through, because we're not paying the costs and they're not paying the costs. It's just going to be higher prices on consumer goods.
And that's why I think pairing
products
it with an elimination or a serious drawback of income tax would be a good evening out. Because if you have more money in your pocket to pay for those higher prices, it changes the effective cost, right?
Yeah, but the only problem I see with that is that the tariffs don't go to the American government, mm-hmm. As much as an income tax does. So I think overall,
did you miss my second part though? To when I said that?
Yeah. I understand that, and you can say that Elon Musk is going to come in and slim down the government, but I think it's going to be a net debt for the United States, and consumers paying more.
Maybe
if it doesn't happen on a reasonable timeline.
All I'll say to that is we're already at $36 trillion in debt, and this is the first big attempted change. So I'm interested to see where it goes. We've just been full steaming ahead for the better part of 40 fucking years, just running that tally up like we never have to pay it back. And that's going to lead to one of a couple of different options. One is default, which really weakens our currency being the world reserve currency. It also makes it much more difficult to sell debt if we have a record of not paying it back. And it could also start conflict with other nations, not being able to collect their debt. And it could cripple the global economy if we default. So I don't think that's an option. Second option is to reduce spending, particularly on our entitlement programs, which the American people just do not have the stomach for. I think we should. I realize that I would take a hit and lose a lot of money from all the Social Security money that I've paid in and will not get out. But I think at some point we need to either completely revamp or burn that system to the ground and start new from scratch. I also don't think we should have it in the first place, but I realize I'm in the minority there. So we either have default, lower expenditure, or raise income of the government. The only way to raise government income is with taxes, tariffs, and sanctions. I don't want any more of those than we have to have, but I definitely don't want it to come out of the American people's pocket if at all preventable. I think we already pay not the highest tax rate in the world, but we pay a pretty high one. So I don't want to increase that. I want to keep more of my money in my pocket. So
I agree.
I just hope that some change, even if this isn't the solution, I hope it spurs whatever the solution is. But I don't think pushing forward business as usual is going to find that solution. I think there has to be some kind of jarring change.
Absolutely, and I think that's what the American people crave, as evidenced by, the vote we just had. And, me personally, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I don't mind paying higher taxes for, programs that benefit society as a whole, but I think I'm in a very small minority there, and I understand that, and I can get on board with what the American people want. Speaking of that kind of thing, we just voted for all of these economic plans that we've just outlined, and I'm, self-aware enough to reflect on that in 4 years and say, hey, if this actually worked and people are benefiting from this, I can say that I'm wrong and say that, the Democratic Party needs to incorporate that kind of thing into their policy if they want to win my vote, because I can't get on board with, some of the humanitarian things and all of that. But, if economic policy, it turns out we were completely wrong about that the entire time, then that's another big thing that just needs to change with the Democratic Party. So,
yeah, and I think you've built yourself a lot of credit in the ability to say you're wrong when you've spent half of this podcast admitting all the ways that you were wrong. So good on you for that one.
Yeah, and I think I've tried pretty hard to balance my support for the Democratic Party and just thinking that Donald Trump is a wrong step for America, with my views on all of these other things, and I think you can see that if you listen to all the episodes. I probably make a lot more concessions in these episodes than you do.
Yes. I think that's
when we talk about these different issues and the parties at large. And I think that speaks a lot to, the state of the party, and the type of campaign that they ran.
Oh, okay.
But I was
about to say, I think that's your temperament and has nothing to do with the party, but you as an individual. But I see what you're saying now. I also think it's a little
well, you're right.
I think I have a little easier time sticking to my guns and calling out the flaws in your party because I know more about your party than you know about my party, right? So it's easier for me to stick to my guns as someone who is not a conservative, so I don't have to defend the conservatives. So it's easier for me to stick to my guns and criticize your side just because I know more about your side than you know about mine.
Well, what I'm getting at is I've been doing kind of a tightrope act of sticking to my moral values and also defending a campaign that I wasn't necessarily entirely enthusiastic about, but thought was the right option for the American people. But I can absolutely 100% in retrospect say they fucked it all up, and here's why the American people are pissed off. So
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, do you have any final thoughts on the election or anything we talked about here today?
No, I think the only thing I got for it is I fully expect you to pay up at deer camp.
I absolutely will. I lost that bet fair and square, 100%. So,
Well,
all right. Well, we'll end this episode like we always do, and I love you, Drew.
I love you too, Mike. And thanks everybody for listening. We
We appreciate it. Until next time.